My name is Camila Rowe, and last Saturday night I realized I had officially been erased from my own family's story. The restaurant lights were warm, the tablecloths white, and 40 people stood waiting for my father to begin his speech. He raised his glass, smiled toward the crowd, and said, "Tonight, we celebrate Harper Rowe. Accepted into Wharton proof that the Rowe legacy continues." The applause felt endless. And for a second, I thought maybe he'd forgotten I existed. When the noise faded, he looked in my direction only to add, "And thank you to my older daughter, Camila, for helping plan the event. Every family needs someone who keeps things running smoothly." Laughter rippled across the room, polite and hollow, as if I were part of the staff. My mother's eyes stayed fixed on her wine glass, and Harper's smile froze halfway. Unsure whether to look proud or guilty, I lifted my water glass instead of champagne and whispered, "You're welcome, Dad. Truly, I have due." He nodded, already turning back to his guests, talking about legacy, success, and image, the things that always mattered more than people. I felt a strange calm, almost relief, because humiliation had a limit and he'd finally crossed it. I reached into my purse and tapped my phone screen, the unread message still glowing. The subject line simple and sharp: "Official offer letter, New Haven General Hospital." I smiled just enough for him to notice. "Before you finish, there's an email you might want to hear," I said, my voice steady. He laughed lightly, waving me off. "Not now, Camila. Please, let's not make this awkward." I leaned forward, my tone flat but polite. "Oh, I insist. It concerns me, but it involves everyone in this room." For the first time all evening, the noise around us stopped. In my family, success has always worn a tailored suit and carried a business card that said Rowe and Partners Realty. My father, Robert Rowe, built that image brick by brick and demanded everyone else live inside it. My mother, Linda, learned to smile through every conversation that made her smaller. And my sister Harper was raised to believe ambition only counted if it could be measured in profit. I was the outlier who traded power lunches for lab samples, the daughter who broke the lineage of real estate and public image. When I told my father I'd accepted a full-time position at New Haven General, he looked up from his laptop and said, "A lab technician? So, you'll be assisting people who assist doctors." I answered, "I'll be diagnosing results that save lives." But he was already typing, his silence louder than any insult. Harper tried to lighten the air with, "Dad just means he wants you to have stability." I smiled without warmth. "I already do." The conversation ended there, but the dismissal lingered. Weeks later, an email arrived from my mother with the subject line, "Rowe Family Milestone Celebration." It listed the date, time, and location, but not a single mention of what we were celebrating. I scrolled down to find my name missing entirely from the guest announcement, replaced with, "Join us in honoring Harper Rowe's academic achievement." When I called my mother, she said, "Sweetheart, your father wants to showcase Harper's acceptance to Wharton. It's a perfect opportunity for the company's image." I asked, "So I'm just background again?" She paused before answering, "Let's not make this about you." That night I opened my inbox again, staring at another message waiting unopened, one that carried the hospital's seal. The subject read, "Formal appointment, Department of Clinical Sciences." I didn't tell them about it. Not yet. If they wanted to celebrate legacy, I would let them. They'd see soon enough that I had built my own. The week before the party, I asked my mother if she could talk to my father about changing the focus of the event. She didn't look up from arranging flowers and said, "Camila, Your father has already spent a fortune on the venue. Let's not cause unnecessary conflict. I said. It's not conflict. It's respect. He's turning my announcement into Harper's Showcase. She sighed, still trimming stems. You always take things so personally. He just wants to keep the family's image consistent. I asked. Consistent with what? Mom, pretending I don't exist? She pressed the flowers into a vase. Her tone flat. You're being dramatic. This isn't about you. I laughed quietly. That's the point. Isn't it? Her silence confirmed it more than words could. I walked away before she could find a way to make it sound like love. That night, I called my grandmother, Grace Donovan, the only person who had ever called to ask about my work instead of my last name. When I told her about the guest list and the banner that didn't include me, she said, He's always been obsessed with how things look, not how they are. I asked. Then why show up at all? She replied. Because appearances cut both ways. If they want a show. Let's give them one. I frowned. You're suggesting I go and let him humiliate me? She chuckled softly. No. I'm suggesting you let him underestimate you. Dine. The next morning, a courier dropped off an envelope with my grandmother's handwriting on it. Inside was a neatly folded copy of my official appointment letter and a handwritten note. When people refuse to see you, don't argue. Make them look. I placed it on my desk beside the unopened hospital email and thought about how quiet power never needed to shout. My father would bring his guests, his speeches, his image. I would bring facts, sealed and printed on official letterhead. They had built their lives around visibility. I had learned to work in silence. And in that silence, I was preparing the loudest moment of my life, the night of the party. My father stood at the head of the room, the banner behind him reading Celebrating the Rowe Family Legacy. He lifted his glass and said, Tonight, we honor Harper Rowe for her acceptance into Wharton, a continuation of what this family stands for: ambition, excellence, success. Applause followed, polite and rehearsed, the kind that fills space but not sincerity. I sat at the far end of the table, the sound barely touching me as he added, and of course, thank you to my older daughter, Camila, for organizing this evening. Every family needs someone reliable behind the scenes. Nober, I said quietly. Behind the scenes. That's all I ever am to you. Isn't it? He smiled, like I'd made a harmless joke. Let's not ruin the moment with bitterness. I looked up, my voice even. I'm not bitter. I'm just wondering when my name will appear on something that isn't a footnote. He dismissed me with a nod. Turning back to the crowd. Now. Where were we? Ah, yes. The future of the Rowe name. What into? I rose slowly. Actually, before you move on, there's something I'd like to share. My mother murmured. Camila. Please. Sit down. I didn't. It'll only take a minute. My father's tone sharpened. This isn't the time. I met his eyes. Then when is the time? Dad? When you're done pretending I'm part of the catering staff? The room went still. The faint clink of a dropped fork echoing like punctuation. He forced a laugh. You're being dramatic again. Everyone knows this night is for the family. It's always for the family, I said, pulling my phone from my bag. But for once, the family might want to hear the truth. I tapped the screen, and the microphone amplified my voice. This email arrived last week from New Haven General Hospital. I thought it could wait. But apparently, timing is everything, my father muttered. Camila. Enough. I continued anyway. It says, Congratulations. Ms. Rowe, You have been selected as Department Lead for Clinical Sciences. Effective immediately. With a bonus of $12,000 for your contribution to the State Diagnostics Project. Eyes. A ripple went through the tables. Someone whispered, "Lead? At her age?" My father's face tightened. "We're not here to discuss your job," I said. "You weren't here to discuss me at all." "But you brought me anyway," my mother whispered. "Camila, please." I turned to her. "You told me to stay quiet for the sake of peace." "Whose peace was that?" "Exactly?" She didn't answer. My father's voice rose. "This is inappropriate. You're embarrassing yourself." "Art." I smiled slightly. "No. I think I'm finally introducing myself." Before he could respond, a voice from the doorway said, "Actually, she's doing quite the opposite." Dr. Alan Reese stepped into view. His tone professional, but cutting through the silence like glass. "Dr. Reese from New Haven General. We're very proud of Ms. Rowe's leadership and her recognition by the State Health Board." My father blinked. Stunned. "You're joking," Dr. Reese said. "Not at all. The governor's office issued a letter of commendation this morning. I brought a copy." "Ein." He handed it to me, and I read aloud. "In acknowledgement of exemplary service in public health, we extend gratitude to Ms. Camila Rowe for her contribution to community diagnostics and crisis response." I looked up at my father. "You wanted legacy." "Dad, I built one." He opened his mouth. But the words faltered. "You've made your point," he said finally. I shook my head. "Not yet. My point is that success doesn't come from your name on a banner. It comes from showing up when people need you. Something you never did for me." "Oh." My mother's voice broke through the murmur. "Camila, your father didn't mean to," I interrupted softly. "He did. He meant every word he's ever said to make me smaller." Harper stood suddenly, her expression uncertain. "Dad." "She's right. You never even asked what she does. And she literally saved lives during that outbreak last year." He turned toward her. "Betrayed. You're siding with her now?" she said quietly. "I'm just seeing her." "Jenner." I looked around the room. The guests watching. Their applause now cautious but genuine. "You wanted a celebration. Dad, consider this one complete." He tried to recover, forcing a smile. "Let's not exaggerate. Families argue. They move on." I met his gaze and said, "Then maybe this family can move on without me." The hush that followed was heavier than anger. "Dr. Reese nodded politely to the guests and said, "Congratulations again, Ms. Rowe. You've earned it." I thanked him and turned to leave. But not before meeting my father's eyes one last time. "You said every family needs someone behind the scenes," I said quietly. "Turns out, I was the whole foundation." Then I walked out. And for once, no one tried to stop me. A week after the party, the local paper ran a feature titled, "Young Scientist Receives Governor's Commendation." My name was printed above the fold, right where my father's used to be in the real estate section. That morning, he called my mother into his office and said, "They could have mentioned the family business." "At least a quote," she answered quietly. Maybe they wanted to focus on her for once. He didn't respond. Just shut the paper and stared at the blank wall behind his desk. Later that day, my mother called me. "Your father's having a difficult time," she said, her voice low. "The partners keep asking questions about that night." I replied, "That's between him and his reflection." "Mom," she said, "he's still your father." I said, "And he's still the man who turned my work into a punchline." The silence that followed was long enough to sound like understanding. You could talk to him, she whispered. No. He needs to learn what silence feels like when it isn't protecting him. 2 days later, Harper appeared outside the hospital during my break, holding a bouquet that looked too big for her hands. I came to apologize, she said before I could speak. I didn't realize how cruel it was until I watched him do it. I asked, "And now you see it?" She nodded. Yeah. I see how easy it was to let him decide who mattered. I told her. Then stop letting him. Decide for yourself. She smiled a little. I've applied for a summer internship here. Maybe it's time I earned something on my own, I said. Then start by not hiding from what's real. It's goad. That evening, my grandmother called. Heard your father's client dropped him, she said plainly. Guess reputation can't be flipped like property, I answered. I didn't want that to happen. She laughed softly. You didn't make it happen. Truth did. I looked around the lab. The quiet hum of machines steadier than any applause. I just wanted to work in peace, I said. She replied. And now you can. That's more than most people ever get. Weiss. 3 months later, I sat in the hospital cafe during my break, my badge reflecting the new title beneath my name, Camila Rowe, clinical lead. The air smelled like coffee and antiseptic. A mix I'd grown to love because it meant work that mattered. My phone buzzed with a message from Harper. Dinner at Mom's tonight, no speeches. Just us. Please come. Another message followed from my mother. We'd like to see you. Your father's trying. I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. Maybe. But I'm bringing something different this time, boundaries. When I visited my grandmother the next day, she was waiting with tea already poured. She smiled and said, You look lighter. Camila, I told her. It feels strange, like breathing after holding it too long. She laughed softly. That's what peace feels like when it finally belongs to you, I said. I didn't think I'd ever stop trying to make them see me, she answered. They don't need to see you anymore. You do. The quiet between us was easy. The kind that didn't demand performance. Later that night, I walked home through the city, the lights blinking against the dark windows. For years I'd measured my worth by their approval, waiting for a moment that was never meant to come. Now I understood that invisibility had never been a curse. It had been my cover to build something of my own. I didn't win against them. And I didn't need to. The victory was smaller and sharper than pride. I'd stopped shrinking to fit their frame. As I turned the key to my apartment, I whispered to no one in particular. I don't need to be seen anymore. I just need to keep being great. Thank you for staying until the end of my story. If you've ever felt unseen or underestimated for choosing your own path, I hope this reminded you that quiet strength speaks loudest. Share where you're watching from and what part stayed with you. I'll see you in the next story.